we're here with some guests today. I will just start doing some introductions as we are having our guests come in. So first of all, I just want to thank our guests, Michael Knight and Allison Sevilla, for being here today and joining us for this very important discussion. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, and what I will do is, before we get started, I will just, Allison, and I'll start with you. Just introduce yourself, your company, and just your background in the industry.
Sure. So I'm Allison Sevilla. I'm the CEO of Galco Industrial Electronics. I've been there for about 4.5 years. My experience in electronics distribution spans close to 30 years, which I cannot believe how quick time goes. And a lot of that time was spent at Aero Electronics and in many different roles. So happy to be with you here today.
Nice. Okay, Michael.
Michael Knight. I'm the CEO of Andrews International, actually in the same space as Allison these days, but like Allison, started life in electronic components, worked for a major competitor to Aero, a company called TTI, and had been in electronic components for, like Allison, about 30 years. And also, like Allison, I can't believe how fast that time is ripped by.
It is crazy. Well, thank you for being here, both of you. Lots of expertise in the industry, so that's why we have you here. Why am I moderating on behalf of we? It's because we're an organization dedicated to this industry and focusing on the people and how is it what is going on in the industry is impacting our leaders in the industry. So I have a background as well in the industry, started in college and have been around for about 35 years and just fell in love with this industry, the electronic component industry in particular, because of the people, because we have the best people across any industry right here in electronics. So anyway, no offense, Michael and Allison now. But anyway, but I wanted to get rolling. Anybody who has questions as we're talking and wants to make comments and chat, we have a whole team behind the scenes. You're looking at your comments, they'll be alerting us if there's anything we should address, but you're just overhearing a conversation. These are pretty important topics we're going to be reviewing today, and just wanted to start by saying, you know, we are here under We United, and really, I love this quote. A resilient supply chain is not just about technology, it's about people, partnerships, and purpose. I love that because we always have to keep the focus on the people. So what are we doing here with We United, an organization dedicated to the people, right? We are uniting men and women across technology sectors to come together and have conversations just like this, to develop together and to grow together. We really believe we have to do this together. Any leadership initiative, it's together where we have the success. So we're happy, we're excited, we are grateful that we have leaders from all roles and responsibility across the entire ecosystem coming together. So thank you for being here. We United, I just explained who we are, but we lead with civility, ethics, and humanity. And every conversation we have, we approach it with civility, ethics, and humanity. So I'll get into a little bit some of our rules of engagement for this webinar, but everything we do, we're pulling in this aspect of leadership. And so thank you for you all being here and operating within civility, ethics, and humanity. And the We program, we have 3 main pillars, just so anybody who doesn't know us, we are dedicated to leadership development, so leadership growth, mentorship, and community. Those are our main pillars. If you're interested in participating in any of our programs, look in the chat and our team will put some information there for you to access. And we always start with gratitude because we're so thankful for being here and having the support, right, of our sponsors. And I'll start with our platinum sponsors. Without these sponsors behind us, we would not be here right now. So everyone sitting in conference rooms all over the globe. We've got some people in Europe right now. We've got some people in the US. We've got people all over thank you for being here. And thank you, sponsors, for opening your doors, especially DigiKey right now over in Europe, having a team of people at your location. And I've heard the Mauser Group has the same going here in the US. So we are all one united family under this roof. Thank you, gold sponsors. Here's some more sponsors that are behind us. We so appreciate you, and our silvers. So as you can see, we are very well supported in the industry by some leading organizations, and we also have other programs and ways to participate with we. So look in the chat, and we'll give you that information as well. Also, just a little disclaimer before we get started. Anytime you see a we event, you will see these logos. You're either going to see Women in Electronics, it's a registered trademark, or you're going to see We United in the trademark process. Any event we do, you will see our logos. If you don't see that, or if you have a question, please contact me, Jackie at weunited.tech, and make sure that you are aligning. If you think it's us, these are our logos we use, okay? And last slide before we get into our discussion. Every single chapter meeting we do across the globe, every event we do, we start with this. What are our values? Honor, authenticity, courage, and commitment. Every conversation that we have, whether it's a difficult one, whatever it is, this is how we approach our meetings. So we're asking everyone to pinky promise. We're all going to agree to disagree. We're talking about policy here. That's our focus here, an economic conversation about policy, not about anything else. So I want everybody to know under this roof, we are all united and we are coming together for a common purpose to talk through how are the tariffs going to impact our industry and the people. So that's what we're here to do. To level set, okay? We base all of our information, so do Allison, Michael, anybody we're collaborating with, on very factual information. So we want to be a source for you of where to get some very factual information. When you hear different things going on, especially leaders, please look up the information yourself. There is going to be in the chat a link directly to our page where you can always access this. So just please make sure you know you have access to all the factual data about tariffs. Beyond that, beyond this conversation, there's all kinds of information you hear in the news, right? So let's look at some sources that are very neutral. We want to be a very neutral source of information, and we want you to have that at your disposal. So that will be information will be in the chat as well. So just know you can always access these sources on our site. And we're going to start right here. What is a tariff? What is that? What is the intended purpose? And maybe I'll just start with you, Michael. What is a tariff for?
So I think the first important thing about a tariff, which is still oddly enough, I don't think widely understood, is it's a tax, and it's a tax that the importer pays. So, and I import a lot of the stuff that I supply my customers. So when I import it, I pay the tariff. And tariffs are a little different than duties because it's they're maybe two sides of the same coin. There's also a thing called a duty, which has a little bit of a different purpose. Duties tend to be more universally applied and smaller amounts. So they tend to get put into prices, which is why we don't really think about duties or feel duties like we do on tariffs. And by the way, the duty that I pay on a lot of the stuff that I import, especially from Asia, is about 8.5%. So it's not it's actually not insignificant. But that's what a tariff is. What the purpose of a tariff is historically to protect U.S. industry, U.S. producers from foreign competitors who may be underwritten by their government, who want to lead with price. So the U.S. market historically has been very attractive to businesses around the world, and today, of course, it's the biggest market in the world. So folks who want access to our market, tariffs is a way of controlling that and making sure that our domestic industries are not disadvantaged. That's the traditional purpose. Today, it's morphed into something a bit different. It's I would say tariffs traditionally are a tool. Today, they've been frankly weaponized. It's a weapon to force other countries to do things that we want them to do, that actually in some cases go way well beyond just trade. So that's the I think that's the kernel of, or the heart of a lot of the consternation that exists at the moment with the new round of tariffs that are rolling out.
So it's really interesting. So again, team, if you could put a link in the chat, it might already be there, to, we did some research on the historical use in the United States. So you can go right to that brochure. Again, very important for us to all know and understand what are the uses. And when we look back economically, we would look from an economic perspective, what worked, what didn't work. So when I, just new to this, what I represent here on this call is just the average person, right? Who is not very, doesn't have a level of expertise in this area, but we all can learn. So just based on a lot of research and data and discovery, it's all there for you to access. Really important for us to learn from history. Are we learning from prior times where we've implemented tariffs, and what is that impact? Really important to understand so that we can prepare, right? So we can prepare for what maybe what's facing us ahead. So with that, we've all heard a lot of things, right? And this is very dynamic. This is changing. We've heard about the tariffs that are going to be imposed. I would say one of the biggest struggles at the moment is probably just not having the concrete information, which should be coming April 2nd from what we're hearing. So I'm just going to level set right here. And I will have Allison, you and Michael, please. Does this look accurate to you? Is this what we're looking at for everybody to be aware of?
It does as of today, but as you know, this process has been chaotic in terms of changing every day and every week. So, I would say as of today, as what we know as of April 2nd, 3rd, looks pretty accurate.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
there are there's three types of tariffs in play right now. It's called 301, which is a general tariff that President Trump in his first term elevated against China. And the whole industry's been living with that since then. So we've had plenty of time to adjust to it. But that's 25%. There's also a tariff related to Section 232 of the Tariff Code that has to do with aluminum and steel. And that's the big change initially, and that's in the world right now, and that's on a tariff on anything that's made out of aluminum or steel that comes in, that aluminum or steel that wasn't poured here or smelted here and comes into the U.S., and that's 25%, and that's on aluminum and steel parts coming out of Taiwan, all over the place. And then on China, we've got two new tariffs that are part of what's called the IEEPA Act, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And those are 10% each. And those are also universal, not just limited to aluminum and steel. So something coming out of China that's made out of aluminum and steel could have up to a 70% tariff on it. That's what this represents.
Well, so these are the tariffs we're looking at. We will know all of the concrete information coming up April 2nd, and hopefully that will help us planning. So with that, I'm going to stop share for a moment and discuss. We're going to spend a little time talking about this. What's the impact? So here we are. We know we have import taxes now, or import tariffs. So how are we managing this currently? This is the big question of the day. Many of the importers, manufacturers on call, distributors, most people Are you absorbing the cost? Are you passing it on? How's this looking?
So, I would say, from my perspective, and I think the tariffs are affecting my area a little differently than Michael's. And I've mentioned this to you before, Jackie and Michael. It's been a rough 2 years, right, in the industry. And for now, I would say the tariffs are another hole in the boat that you're trying to patch up to survive. So, I would say most where they can are, of course, going to pass it on because based on the economic issues that we've been facing for 2 years, there's many companies, smaller ones, albeit, and larger ones, that they just can't take another hit of, lowering their margins to be able to continue to do business. It's not sustainable. So for the most part, where they can, they are, and probably more so than they ever have in the past, out of necessity.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you see, Michael?
25% increase in cost is significant. And, in our industries, margins aren't that terrific to begin with. That will absolutely, not only does it suck all the profit, what profit we can get out of this business, it goes well beyond that. So that's the other thing that I think is the public is starting to understand is this is going to get passed through. So this isn't just a tax on the import. It actually, in a way, becomes a tax on the individual consumer. And so, we're paying, of course, we pay Social Security and Medicare taxes today, and that generates about 1.7 trillion of income for the U.S. government. We pay $2.5 trillion in personal income tax, and then this is going to be another tax on us as think of it as a consumption tax.
Yeah.
So like Allison said, everybody that I talk to in terms of folks that I compete with in this industry and other industries, no one has. There is no choice. It's getting passed through. How it gets passed through, there are some options, but make no mistake. Unfortunately, it's we can't absorb something of this magnitude.
So, okay, so let me ask you this question then. Are the customers pushing back? I mean, are some people saying, no, we are not paying that. We can't absorb it. So what do those negotiations look like in the channel right now with your customers, but also your stakeholders?
So again, I think Michael can talk about some of the issues that he's having. From my perspective, I think we're all in this together, right? This is affecting the entire supply chain from manufacturing to distribution through the end customer. And we do what we can. I think transparency is key, right? You've built trust with your suppliers and your customers. And I think if you're honest, this is what we have to do. I mean, it's not like anyone doesn't know it's coming, right? This is not something that people can fact check and say it's not true. So, for us, I think we've been very, very open about the fact, this is not a cost that we can just eat. And the suppliers, I have to say, in my area of industrial automation and MRO, the suppliers have been very flexible. I would say that's another key word: transparency and flexibility, right? Because every customer is different. Some customers, want it rolled up in their price. Other customers are requesting a separate line surcharge. So it really is key to just be open and honest and be able to be flexible in your approach, both with suppliers upstream and your end customers downstream.
Yeah. The
Michael.
additional wrinkle in this is there's still I don't know if it's a belief, a hope, maybe both, that this isn't going to stick. And so that uncertainty is creating an erosion of consumer confidence. business confidence. It's creating, we're in a place where I feel like, as Allison said, in our world, and Allison and I both live in primarily in the industrial sector. The industrial sector has been in a recession, as indicated by the US PMI, for now over 2 years. And folks were just starting to climb out of their foxholes. And this is, I think, sent everybody back into the foxhole. And that's the tough piece about this, because and we're going to talk about this, I think, as we go forward. There's a demand destruction element to this with rising prices. That's one of the problems about inflation. And and I hate to use the I word, but that we were getting that under control. Now a lot of, pretty much actually every economist that I read is talking about there's no escaping it. This is going to be inflationary for our businesses, inflationary for each of us individually, and that's going to curtail demand. When you're talking about imported cars, yesterday we learned that import car tariffs are going from 2.5%, which is where they've been on average for a long time, to 25%. So imagine you're now paying 25% more for the vehicle that you're buying. What is that going to do to car sales? I mean, it's not going to be good, right? And there's tons of those examples. So the uncertainty aspect of this is a big challenge. And to kind of tie this back to what Allison was saying, as each of us in our businesses decide how to deal with this, first thing we have to do is decide whether or not this is for real and it's going to stick. Because if a month or two from now this is gone, and any action we're taking right now is incredibly disruptive, perhaps harms our relationship with a customer that we value. And so everyone I talk to is going through the kind of the mental math on, do I just suck it up for a little bit and hope for the best? Do I get proactive? What do I do here? And that's a very company and individual decision to make. And not that anybody is asking for it or actually wants to hear my opinion. But
we always want to hear your opinion, Michael.
Because I'm full of them. In my opinion, this isn't going anywhere. This is a long-term play to strengthen the manufacturing position of the U.S. And in lots and lots of ways, I'm absolutely on board with the objective. But because it's a long-term play, it's going to take, if you think about one of the stated objectives is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., to strengthen manufacturing back in the U.S. That doesn't happen overnight. So if the tariff is intended, again, stated objective, intended to catalyze that, you have to stick with it. If you don't stick with it, it undermines our credibility as a country. It undermines the president's credibility. And I mean, obviously, I don't know the guy personally, but I tend to believe him. I take his word when he says something, and I also tend to believe credibility is extremely important to him. I mean, it should be important to us as a country. So to kind of use this as a negotiation ploy, flip in and out, I don't think that's what's going on. I think we need to take the president and the new cabinet secretaries at their word on this, that we're in this for the long haul. Mm-hmm. But that also creates some problems, because I'm not smart enough to understand how all this is going to ultimately play out. But I am smart enough to understand that in January, there were 462,000 job openings in just manufacturing, 462,000 unfilled jobs in the U.S. in manufacturing. In the total economy, 7.7 million unfilled jobs. So we already don't have enough people to support manufacturing. Today, 1 in 12 people in the U.S. economy are somehow in a job tied to manufacturing. So we bring all this stuff back in, especially if it happened quickly, which of course it doesn't. It takes a long time to set up a new factory. How are we going to staff it? How are we going to power it? The U.S. Energy infrastructure is already at capacity. Our roads are at capacity. How are we going to move this stuff? We don't have enough trucks. There's so many things that have to be put in place for this to work. And again, that's going to take time. And frankly, I think this is I think this is going to be a long-term thing. So you didn't ask for it, but you just got my opinion.
So, okay, let me ask you a question real quick, because I did get a text from our team. As people are listening, they're asking questions, and we have people in the channel who are impacted and want to know your opinions on these things. So I'm just, here I am, the layperson, I'm just going to ask. And it's one of the questions that I think is probably a good question, because steel and aluminum are like a big hot topic right now, right? So it says, given the complexity of qualifying for USMCA, that's the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and steel/aluminum regulations, how are companies allocating resources to determine eligibility and set priorities? Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah. So I'll jump on this one, because I am literally living this every minute of my life right now, because more than 90% of what I supply customers is made out of steel. I'm actually kind of hard pressed to imagine a company more in the jaws of this than my company, Andres. And it's hugely resource. It's a huge consumer resource right now. And it really falls at the moment to the purchasing and sourcing team. First, to understand all of this. So we actually end every day with a call with our broker to find out exactly what's happened today and what we can expect for tomorrow, because it is changing a lot. So the short version of this, guys, is how we started this is we took every single part that we import, and by the way, it's about 110,000 part numbers, and looked at now how it's affected, in terms of harmonization code, the rate, when it goes into effect, what other countries could we source this out of, with a particular eye on the U.S. And folks, in the U.S., there is actually a lot of domestic manufacturing for the stuff I supply, but it's been at capacity for a long time. And here's the thing about where we are at this moment in time. If you're uncertain about how long this is going to stick around, are you really going to invest in capacity in North America or in the US in incremental capacity? Because by the time you get it online, the tariffs could be gone, and everybody could go back to their kind of traditional supply chains, including sourcing things over internationally. So we look at 110,000 part numbers. We've got to match that up with our customers, understand the impact of it, and then understand too what the requirements are from the government. And can you guys hear that? I've got a raven outside my office window that wants to come in. No. And yeah, he's like the size of a poodle. It's amazing. So we've got so yesterday we learned that on top of everything else, there's going to be now a documentation requirement on everything that's metal that's coming in to the US that we're importing. And we're going to have to provide, get and store information about where the metal was mined and where it was smelted and then where it was poured. And we don't have to actually at the moment supply it to the Customs and Border and Patrol folks when we import, but we have to have it on record because they reserve the right at any point in time to come back and look for that information. And the reason for that is because I think they're planning for the possibility of exemptions based on that data. But you think about that. One, it's a huge imposition on our suppliers. They now have to organize that and supply it. You know, is it hard copy? Is it digital? And it's a big impact on us. And guys, our industry is already buried under a lot of non-productive costs associated with capturing and storing compliance data, and I mean, all kinds of things, you know, that's required of us these days. So yeah, that's a big question.
That's a big question. It gets us into the discussion too about resources. So we're talking about resources dedicated. Researching this, it just seems like a tremendous amount of resources, and companies would have to have some kind of a cushion to account for. And I would imagine in your business plans, you're accounting for a certain amount of disruption, right? But what kind of resources need to be allocated? It appears maybe some digital resources, right, to help provide all the information needed along the different steps in the supply chain. Are there dynamic tools and solutions that align with the ERP systems to help track things along the way? You know, is everybody already using things? Are there, all these solutions out there? Like, how are people managing the level of compliance along the way? We're even talking about trading, switching out partners. Well, that's like a whole compliance issue in itself. So these just seem to me like extreme resources. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would agree. You need resources. But, I think the problem here is that it's really hard to talk about tariffs as a single concern today, right? And I made that comment earlier about it being another hole in the boat that we have to fix. Tariffs are bothersome and are a new, nuance in the business, increased cost to manage, chaotic, decreased margins if you can't pass it on, so on and so forth, right? But in a roundabout way of answering your question, Jackie, I think it's really important to recognize that this is not the only thing that, our industry is facing and has been facing, right? And the way that you execute to this, I believe, is very different, because if you think about when they happened, at first several years ago, the economy in our space was different back then, right? And it probably was one or two problems that kept you up at night. Today, there's a laundry list, and Michael hit on it earlier about the PMI. The longest history of the PMI being in contraction was 26 months, which just ended in December of 24, right? The longest in history of the world. So, the industry has never seen anything like that. On top of that, that comes right after COVID and the supply chain craziness that we lived through. Now contraction for 26 months. Somehow January and February showed a PMI over 50, which signals growth again. We'll see what March looks like. February was down to January. But, the point of me saying in all of this is that you're already dealing with, companies that are not in the best shape financially in terms of revenue coming in. Demand has been down. And what I believe was going to be, as so as everyone else believed, the second half was going to somehow be this, second coming of greatness of the industry turning around. I think the tariffs is going to push that out. And, yes, we need resources to handle this, but when you're facing some sort of economic, incidents that we've been facing for 2 years, how do you go and put now this extra stress on businesses to now handle something else, right? So to answer your question, adding more people is probably not the best solution for most companies right now that have already been stretched for 2 years. So anything that you can do from an automation or AI perspective, which there are several software companies out there that offer help around including tariffs and other things that come up around trade compliance, that's the best way, because inducing cost into businesses right now, probably not going to be the best answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and actually, I see in the chat a couple of there's a common theme about how what to do about this, and a concern, obviously, that our customers have is the tariffs bad enough? Is this going to be an opportunity for their supplier to apply additional markup on the tariff? And that gets to, there's a couple of different ways. If you're gonna pass this through, there's a couple of different ways to do it. And personally, here at Endries, our preferred way to do this is as a surcharge, and not as a surcharge on our resale to our customer, but as a surcharge on our cost, because the tariff is based on our cost, right? So we are being extremely transparent about this, and to the extent that our customer can accept a surcharge invoice with detail, we're providing that. Not all customers can, and we actually have some customers that love the concept but can't handle it and need it actually put into the piece price, which we will also do. But my life is extra complicated because I import and I also source domestically. And on my domestic sources, a lot of the industry uses steel from Canada. In fact, the majority of the domestic manufacturers here in the US use steel from Canada. And a lot of actually my end customers who use steel in their product, whether they're making HVAC systems or snow blowers, that's Canadian steel. 75% of the aluminum we consume here in the US comes from Canada. So my domestic suppliers have a pretty significant cost increase. And because it's a raw material going into their product, it's not something that you can easily do with a surcharge, which means it's getting put into the piece price. So on top of, for every one of my customers, I have situations where on a given customer, I've got stuff where I'm the importer of record. And so I can handle that with a very transparent pass through, a surcharge. I also supply them parts that I source here. So I'm not the importer of record. And if they're imported, the importer of record has put that tariff in the piece price to me, or it's made domestically and it's got this 25% Canadian steel tariff on it. And so I've got to talk to the customer about tariff surcharges. I've got to talk about price increases. And then I have to deliver that in a way that the customer can truly understand what's what. Because you can't, if you go with a blanket solution, what you have to do is go with the highest common denominator to make sure that you've got it covered. And to use a technical term, this really sucks.
Yeah, so I want to comment on this too, because, this is something that is a generic concern. If you look at what happened through COVID, okay, just look at how costs went up. Think of groceries, right? I would say they're still double than what they were prior to COVID. I mean, most people have experienced a very high grocery bill that never really quite went back down. Going out to eat, these kind of things. But the concern would be it's a same effect. Okay, so we have these costs transferring to the customer, but if we're padding it into the price, it's harder to remove it if, say, the tariffs were removed. So are we putting ourselves in a situation where now just the cost of everything is just going to go up again? We're already kind of maxed, I think, with a lot of increased costs to customers. This seems to be a very common concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's called inflation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called
And I
inflation.
got a question in the chat, Jackie, about setting the tariff surcharge based on cost and how that exposes your margin. And it's a great question.
Yes.
And it's the thing, if you remember, our whole industry in 2018, when the 301 was put on China, had to figure this out. And the answer is, I'm actually, what I pass through isn't 100%. There is a piece of this that I'm absorbing along with my supplier. So I've been able to, I have longstanding relationships with a lot of my suppliers. They've been great partners. So we are collectively trying to eat a little bit of this pain as much as we can. So yeah, it's not a, what I'm, the amount that I'm charging for it is actually not that revealing because of that. If I was after 100% recovery, you could obviously really easily calculate my margin. And by the way, there's a piece of me it's kind of all for that, because I think if my end customers knew what my margin is, they might feel less suspicious, right? Because I'm not a publicly traded company, but my margins they have to be in line because it's a competitive world. If my margin and I'm not. This is not a margin-rich environment. I mean, anybody in components, it's been a long time since you could call that margin, things margin-rich, right? That was a good question.
It is a really good question, and I feel like, in 15 minutes, it's so hard. We're probably gonna go a little over, people. Some people have to hop off at 9. You can, but we're probably gonna go a little over because we're just starting to get into the meat of the conversation. Because maybe I should share this real quick, but we were talking about earlier, what are some of the impacts? And then we're starting to talk about, okay, what's going to happen as a result of this? And somebody did just ask a very good question. Will tariffs lead to more countries bypassing the US and trading with other countries? I think it's already happening right now. The supply chains are changing and people are talking behind the scenes. It's already in it's already in action. But let me share this real quick. Hold on a second and see. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. See if I can switch my slide. There we go. Houston. We do have a problem here. So we are in this together. Imagine we're in a rocket ship together. We're going up. There's a fire that's kind of going off. We just don't know that at this moment it's erupting. We just haven't experienced all the ramifications. But this is the response, okay, that we need to be planning for in the channel. We don't have all the solutions here, but we can come together as united industry. All of our people from across Europe, wherever you are, in the US, Mexico, we have members in Mexico, we have members all over the place. Please know, we need to unite as an industry. No matter what happens, when the world divides, community unites. And this is why we have to keep having these conversations. Allison said it so perfectly. Together is how we get through it. So the policies that are in place that we're talking about, these are the international responses. You'll hear retaliatory tariffs, you'll hear all these terms. In essence, that means trade war. And so this is what we're looking at, what are, internationally, what is being proposed if we go through with our tariffs. And as Michael said, we could probably count on it. So this is what we're looking at. So what is the consequence? What's that? Did
So,
somebody, Michael, did you ask?
Yep. So, Jackie, I think there's a really, really important, simple point to make here, that there are no winners in a trade war. They're not. And as you go through the history of tariffs and trade wars, it's super obvious. And the other thing is, this is policy, it's not politics.
Yes.
And this isn't a red or blue thing. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. That the fact is that for the last 50 years, Republicans in particular have been very much about open and free trade. So, and just to underscore that, if you remember NAFTA, which predated the USMCA, which is the replacement that President Trump negotiated in his first term. But NAFTA and then USMCA basically eliminated tariffs and duties between the Canada, US, and Mexico. It created free trade, and I want to read two quotes that I think are really important. First, from George H.W. Bush, the first George Bush. In his inauguration, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the goal of this administration's trade policy, simply put, is to open markets, not to close them, to fight protectionism, not to give into it. We don't want an America that is closed to the world. What we want is a world that is open to America." And I honestly, I would bet money that everybody on this call, that everybody, in terms of that last example or that last objective, which is a world that's open to America, is an agreement. And if you go back even further, one of the architects to globalism and proponents of globalism was President Ronald Reagan, and who was a president through much of the 80s. And he had grown up in the Depression. So he was very familiar with what tariffs did in terms of exacerbating and extending the Depression. And he was and here's what Ronald Reagan said. He said, "Tariffs create a reliance on government protection and stifle innovation. When prices increase due to tariffs, consumers reduce spending, leading to market shrinkage and job losses," which directly talks to this kind of demand creation or demand destruction element that you bring up. And the reason tariffs, there are no winners in a trade war, is because the other side in the war can retaliate. We're not the only ones that have, bombs and missiles. The other side does as well. And so even in and I'm going to shut up here in a second and give Allison a chance, I'm sorry, but even in the 2018 301 tariff enactment, when it was all said and done, though even the Chinese economists freely admit it created about 3 times more damage to their economy than it did to ours. But it's important to understand it did hurt our economy. It especially hurt our farmers. Because the Chinese, how they retaliated the first time, and oh, by the way, that's how they're retaliating this time, is they're putting their own tariffs on the agricultural products that we export. And China is one of our biggest markets, international markets for our farmers. And it cost our farmers billions of dollars in sales, which we don't need to worry too much, because the federal government subsidizes farmers. And when the farmers pointed out, "Hey, you're killing us with this tariff stuff," we just up the subsidy to take this thing out of it. So in a weird way, the tariff money that we were collecting, because it's income, right, for the federal government, we were then giving to our farmers. At the moment, what we collect last year in 2024, we collected $80 billion in revenue for the federal government. So once upon a time, I think we might have mentioned about 90% of the federal government revenue came from tariffs. And there is some fear that that's one of the objectives now, is to get back to, we can plug the hole that we have in our budget with tariff income, but we got to deal with the fact that that plug is coming out of our wallets. It's coming out of our customers' wallets.
Well, and Allison, we've talked about this before. I would say these are all very complex, complicated issues, but a lot of our same leaders are in place now that have been, through multiple years. I have a serious, my heart goes out. I have to say, if we could be talking about anything, bring the human component, please support your leaders. All these people in leadership roles are making very tough decisions, working round the clock. It's just a good time to know it's a tough time to be a leader, but I'll turn it over to you, Allison, because we've talked about these issues before. How do we support our leaders through this? Oh, you're muted, Allison, I think. Oh, Spencer, I think Allison needs to be unmuted. I think everyone is muted right now. There we go.
Okay. So, I feel like, as you mentioned, Jackie, we've had tariffs since George Washington, right? But what I would say is that right now is different than any other tariff time. And none of us know what's going to happen next week, because, even the tariffs that happened during Trump's first time in office, that was more, right around China, right? We have never seen the level of, I would say, worldwide tariffs, both from us and well as tariffs in retaliation. And we have never had the level of global integration in supply chain that we do today, right? So quite honestly, I don't think there's anybody that knows what is going to happen, because we haven't lived through it before. Yes, we've lived through tariffs. Yes, we've lived through trade wars, but not with this level of global integration that exists in today's world. I mean, it's definitely globalism in terms of how we manage our supply chain. If you think about distribution for a second, those components, they can make many stops along the way before it actually gets to the end user. I mean, it's way more complicated than it was 10 years ago, even 7 years ago. So, I think it's fair to say nobody has the answers, right? And I think having some patience and grace around, how is this going to be handled? Well, nobody knows. April 2nd can come and it can turn around and say, okay, you know what? We've had some conversations and we've all agreed that it'll be April 30th, right? So nobody knows. And what I would say is, I've been lucky, right? Our customer base has been understanding of the fact it is what it is, right? Same with the supplier base. I worry about the things I can change. This is something I can't, but what I can do is make sure that it's as painless as possible, for our team, as well as, our partners, whether they be our suppliers and or our customers, and do what we can with what we have, right? Because again, I think the reality, once it sets in of what we're talking about here, yeah, maybe it's for the long term, but it's not sustainable, right? And I think everyone knows that. And even if it does start to work, right, and we boost all this domestic production, just a funny anecdote, we the EV mandates, we're going to have all these EV mandates, and whether you're for it or against it doesn't matter. I have a hybrid, and a couple of weeks ago, my plug in my garage wasn't working. So I had to go find one outside of my house to see, was it my plug or was it the car that wasn't working? It took me 40 minutes to find a plug somewhere else besides my house that I could test it. Our infrastructure is nowhere near ready to be able to manage,
Yep.
the levels of onshoring or domestic production. To Michael's earlier point, that stuff takes years. I moved into a new warehouse a few years ago. And you're talking about 100,000 square foot building that took 18 months. One building, right? So the reality is, I don't think anyone understands the impact of what's about to happen, because I don't believe it has happened in the past to this level of what's going on. And I think if we believe it's as bad as we believe it's going to be, I don't think it'll be sustainable, and something will happen quickly. I think it's also important to remember, the United States, again, it doesn't matter where you sit on this politically, is the powerhouse of the world. And we'll figure it out. We always do, right? And let's hope the pain is short. Because I worry about, to your earlier point, Jackie, about what is the impact, right? If components is not as fragmented as it was 20 years ago, as we all know. But the industrial markets, as Michael and I know, industrial distribution and industrial manufacturing is extremely fragmented. And when things like this happen and costs go up, that tends for the market to be less fragmented, because unfortunately, that's when you see the tail of either suppliers or customers not being able to survive. It's not sustainable, right? Someone who's small can't pass, if they can't pass on a 25% increase, if they can't pass on a 5% increase, they won't be here in a year, right? If demand slows down, which I believe it will, because I don't believe that we'll see another interest rate cut until the chaos around this whole thing has settled down. It's going to have a large impact on the overall industry, at least my industry and industrial, for months to come, which, people thought they were getting out of it in 3 more months, and I'm not so sure that's the case. So do what you can with what you have, stay transparent, stay honest, be that trusted partner to your suppliers and customers, and, do what you can with what you have, would be my advice.
Yeah. And Jackie, if I could talk for a second about a kind of a bigger picture solution.
Yes, and hold on real quick, Michael. So those of you, I said earlier, we're probably going to go over, but if you have to hop off, it's okay. But we're going to just stay on a little bit. So we will record this. We understand we're at time, but I just said I knew we were going to go over, but it's very critical conversation. So we'll just keep going. So Michael, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There you go.
So tariffs are a stick. Okay, it's a stick. We're using tariffs as a stick today. Another way of accomplishing what I think are very important goals. I agree with the goals. Another way of accomplishing that is with a carrot. Carrots are incentives. And one of the reasons we are in the position we are today in US manufacturing, which is, in the 70s, 1 out of 5 people worked in manufacturing. Today, it's 1 out of 12. Is other countries offered incentives to US companies to move their manufacturing. And let's not lose sight of the fact that this big, decades-long move to offshore was intended to improve shareholder return. It was good for the shareholders of manufacturing companies. It was good for our economy, and actually exports are good for our economy. Buying things offshore that are less expensive than our onshore versions puts more money in our pockets to do other things with, education, etc. Right? So one of the things we've done in this is vilified imports, and I think that's a mistake. We're very concerned about the trade deficit, which means, are we importing more than we're exporting? And the answer is yes. But if you think about it, that isn't necessarily a bad thing either. But we started this trend of sending stuff offshore because other countries provided incentives, tax incentives, tax holidays. They underwrote construction of factories. And, in the course of 50 years, it's been going on, a lot has moved. And so I think one of the ways that we can keep important stuff here, and there's a ton of important stuff, semiconductors, advanced semiconductor manufacturing has to be more important to the US economy. It has to be here. It's strategically important. The way to do that is to offer incentives. And by the way, that's what we were doing with the Infrastructure Act. And part of the Infrastructure Act was the CHIPS Act, which offered incentives, and it was working. TSMC committed and started building a plant, a fab here. Incentives also have the other advantage is they're not mercurial. They don't just, you don't flip them on and off. They get passed into law. You can depend on it. You can plan on it. You can commit because you know that incentive is law and it's going to be there for you as you go through this multi-year, very expensive, very capital-intensive project. So if I had 5 minutes in front of Congress on this subject, I would spend it all talking about let's put the stick away and get back to figuring out the carrot, because it's much more sustainable and it's not as hard on all of us.
That's a very good point, Michael. But also somebody chatted in about the CHIPS Act. So you're hearing all these things. Is that being refined? Is the CHIPS Act, do you know of? Is it staying in place? What's the current, do we know what's actually happening with the CHIPS Act at this point?
It's confusing. Some days I hear they want to shut it down. On other days I hear they like it. It's confusing. I don't know. On the one hand, they want to keep it because it is a really useful and it's been a very effective incentive. On the other hand, we've got this whole other thing going on, which is reducing the cost of government and stripping out, fraud and inefficiency, which, by the way, I also think we can all agree that's long overdue. Now, we might not all agree on the approach, and we probably don't, but in terms of the objective, again, I think that's a very important, very noble objective. But unfortunately, things like the CHIP Act get caught up in that whole exercise because, hey, here's a way to save $52 billion over 10 years. Let's just shoot the CHIPS Act, right? So that's $52 billion less in expense that we have to worry about. So on the one hand, tariffs are trying to increase revenue. On the other hand, all this expense reduction. And in any business, by the way, this is what we get paid to do, right? Control expense, reduce expense while growing revenue. And again, that's a very noble endeavor and very important to the long-term prosperity of our country. But the devil's in the details.
That's a really good point. Somebody was also asking just to clarify, because not all of us are tariff experts, and there's a lot of misconceptions. I know we were grouped on what tariffs are, but there is confusion still on who pays the tariffs, right? Not everybody's an executive at this level. So just for people in the chat, so yes, it's the import, it's the manufacturer on our side, it's the import tax coming into our country. So if we are taking goods or parts from outside of, say, the U.S., our manufacturers would be paying that tax. And that's what we're talking about, transferring that tax down. So just to level set, some people have questions about that, like who's paying the tariff.
Jackie, just another thought that people can be surprised about. A lot of my suppliers during the supply chain problems of a few years ago decided to onshore then, right? So they've had a couple of years. They've built their production here in the U.S. And people believe falsely, okay, I'm fine. If I'm buying from those manufacturers, it's not a problem. They're producing, in the U.S. That's not necessarily true, because if you think about that, just because their manufacturing facility is here in the U.S., that does not mean that all of the components that they're used to building are from the US. So even if their facility for manufacturing is here, it could be very possible that 50% of what they are building is still being imported into the country, which is subject to tariffs. So I would check that out before you assume that you're safe from getting tariffed.
It's country of origin.
Right.
Country of origin. And you bring up a really important point that we haven't touched on, Allison, which is we have certainly talked about the chaos and the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And Jackie started talking about where you should go to get information, but you do have to, you can't be superficial on this. You just can't. I feel like, you remember when COVID first showed up, and before long we were all COVID experts. We were all armchair COVID experts. I think this is like COVID. Before we're through, we're all going to be armchair experts on tariffs. But we've got to go a little bit deeper. And I'll give you an example. There's been a lot of rhetoric about how the Canadians are ripping us off and closing their market to U.S. agriculture, or to U.S. dairy in particular, with a 200% tariff. When you go a little bit deeper, what you find is Canadians are not paying 200% tariff on U.S. milk or cheese. They continue to pay zero tariff. But the way the USMCA was put together, and as a reminder, President Trump negotiated that in his first term. There are limits when we get above when we export, our exports get above a certain limit, then yes, there's a 200% tariff put in place. Today, we're running well under, maybe 50, 60% of those limits. So there's a lot of, that's put out as an example about how we have to get tough on Canada. And I'll tell you, this is very personal for me, because I have an amazing team of people in Canada that is really suffering over this. And in fact, last night, I got an email from one of my Canadian leaders who was due to be in the middle of April here in the States for a big meeting that we're having. And she said, I'm not at all comfortable coming down. I'm worried that I might get stopped at the border. I'm worried about getting arrested. I mean, guys, this isn't good. Canada has been a really amazing neighbor and friend and ally through thick and thin for us. So I would just encourage everybody to go a little deeper, ask some questions, find a news source that's reputable, that you can rely on, and kind of commit to becoming an armchair expert on tariffs.
Right. It's such a good point, and that's what we're here for too, is We United is to unite our industry and stay united. We said it at the beginning and we're going to say it now. No matter what goes on out there, this community unites. We are together as an industry and we care about the people, the civility, the ethics, the humanity. It's critical and important. And somebody was just asking, and let me just throw this out there real quick. I know we're running a couple minutes over, but somebody was asking this critical question, okay? Do tariffs affect stock prices already in the US? I would say I know my answer, but I'll just let each of you comment as we conclude the webinar.
For sure. I mean, if anyone's looked at their portfolio anytime over the last 2 weeks, I think that's self-evident.
It's directly impacted, yes.
Well, it's right now what people are trying to do is figure out what the long-term impact on corporate earnings is going to be, right? And so tariffs are, to Allison's point, they're getting priced into stocks right now. But I worry that they're not fully priced in, because there's still a kind of a hope or belief that this is a short-term thing. But I also believe, and this aligns with the comment that you made, Allison, we got an incredible economy. I mean, despite the rhetoric, the economy's been pretty damn good for a long time. It was good in Trump's first term, whether you like Biden or not. It was good under Biden's term. And I actually think the economy can get through a lot of this as long as we don't go totally nuclear and decide to basically not trade with anybody, which I don't believe is. I mean, at the end of the day, President Trump is a businessman, and he surrounded himself with a lot of people who are business people. So they are not insensitive to this. They're trying to accomplish something, and if it doesn't work, or it comes at too high a price, obviously we all have to hope that they kind of course correct. But this is an amazing country, and an amazing. Actually, the gap between China and the U.S. has opened up in recent years. I'm not at all worried in my lifetime that the Chinese economy is going to eclipse the U.S. economy. But I will also self-confess, I'm a big-time globalist. I think win-win comes with globalization. It's a big world. We have a lot of innovation. We are extremely competitive with our innovation, and I think it works to our advantage to globalize as opposed to nationalize, which is what's being talked about now. So I'm worried. This is keeping me up at night. It's taken far too much of my time and my team's time, but we're going to get through it.
Well, thank you both. And I would like to say, during these times, we keep talking about the credible sources of information. Please do your own research. I think Michael touched on it. Allison, kind of touched on things too. We hear a lot of things. Make sure you're listening to news sources that are very neutral. If you listen to one side, listen to the other, right? Take it with the approach of like a journalist. How am I investigating this information? Closed circles create open wounds. When we stay in our ecosystems, we're in a closed circle. So please do your own research, especially if you're a leader making these critical decisions, making sure you're making them on all the actual real information. And so I wanted to, before we finally conclude, is there any other points, Michael or Allison, any final thoughts to people that we might have missed? And by the way, we probably will have a part 2, because I imagine there's so many things in the comments we didn't get to, and we will get back to you all with your questions. Michael and Allison have agreed they would get back to you and answer any questions. But any final thoughts from Michael, you or Allison?
I mean, I would just say it's not the end of the world, right? It's good to keep it in control and in perspective, right? Everything's relative. Michael made the point before, the U.S. is strong. We've gotten through things before. And this too will pass, I believe, right? So just do what you can, be open and transparent. And I think we'll just get through this like we have other things, particularly over the last 5 years. We're strong.
Michael?
Oh man, this isn't fair to ask me for one final thought. You guys know me. Yeah, I'll just wrap it up with that. I think I've already said all the stuff that that I'm thinking about that's really important. And if we do go for a session 2, that we can go deeper, we can unpack this more. That would be pretty cool. But I'm 1,000% aligned with Allison. I mean, this sucks, but we're tough. We'll figure it out. We are figuring it out.
And for people to stay together. So as we conclude, it's not just that the U.S., I think, is tough. Other countries matter too, right? And to me, we are a global world. And so however anybody looks at it, everybody has their own right to every opinion. I care about the people. This organization just cares about the people in the industry. I believe we have the best people across any industry. And I was just at Embedded World for all of our people listening in Europe, if they're still on. I literally got on that plane coming back from Europe. This is the people side of it. I literally could not stop crying when I came back, because I was expecting when I went to Europe that there would be some animosity, that people would be making comments, right? We have such a people-driven industry, and we have such high quality, amazing people. Everybody's number one question to me, no matter who I talk to, how are you doing? Are you okay? So I would just say, let's just keep asking those questions to each other. How are you doing? Are you okay? What are you thinking? And if somebody's disagreeing or somebody has an opinion different, let's approach it with curiosity and let's be a bridge. So that's what this organization wants to be always, is a bridge of the people to the leaders. So please keep commenting in, please keep reaching out to us. We will keep talking. We might not have all solutions, but we will definitely be here to talk through it with the experts and bringing everyone together. So that's my message. Stay together, stay positive. We've got all the expertise we need right here to make it through everything together. So thank you, Michael and Allison and all of our leaders. And again, pray for your leaders, people. They are having a really tough times getting and navigating through these times. So thank you to every leader who's been having lots of sleepless nights. And thank you for joining us today.